problem with that. I think the sole director at the moment is the mayor. So again, we need another director appointed so that Anglo Holdings can be wound up. There is an issue, I think, that's just been resolved at the moment with a share from the growth company in Anglo Holdings Limited. I know Steve Clark is working on that, and I think there might be reference to this in some papers that's coming to the board later this month. So it's quite a straightforward recommendation. These companies, as we've said before, are now surplus. We obviously had potentially wider ambitions under the previous mayor, but we don't need those companies. So that's the end of my introduction. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Roger. Does any member of the committee want to ask anything on this item? No. I'll therefore take us to the recommendation on page 15. Can I see all those in favour of that recommendation? Thank you. That's unanimous. So if we could move on to item 2.2. Community-led housing support funding. Could I ask Nick Sweeney, who's done some work on this, our residential development manager, to introduce the report? And I'm not sure we've got anyone from Eastern. We have. Okay, they're online. I think we're expecting Kieran Carr, Economic Programmes Manager for Eastern Community Homes. So Cambridgeshire Acre, who are also involved, are also a part of that. So Kieran will be joining us via Zoom, assisted by Nick introducing the report. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. The paper I'm presenting today concerns community-led housing, and members will recall approving a strategy in January whereby Eastern Community Homes were appointed to provide support services to community-led housing groups on behalf of the Combined Authority. Councillor Herbert suggested that members would be interested to learn more of the activities undertaken by Eastern Community Homes, so an information leaflet has been circulated to members. And I'm pleased to introduce Kieran Carr from Eastern Community Homes to provide a brief update on their activities, and then I'll return to present the paper. So over to you, Kieran.
Thanks, Nick, and thank you for inviting me. Introduction, my name is Kieran Carr. I actually work for Cambridgeshire Acre, and Cambridgeshire Acre hosts Eastern Community Homes, which is the community-led housing hub for the East of England and comprises the 6 counties of the East of England. And the members of the hub who provide enabler support are the 6 rural community councils across those 6 counties. And we have enabler support in each of those counties. Cambridgeshire Acre provides the coordination and administration for the hub as a whole and secretarial support to its board. I'm the hub coordinator. Working alongside me in Cambridgeshire as a community-led housing enabler is a colleague of mine, Jenna Brame. Unfortunately, Jenna's on leave today, so I wasn't able to join us. But what I thought I'd quickly do is just go through some of the activities that we've been doing over the last few months. As Nick said, we've provided a leaflet of information for what we've been doing, and a couple of points about what we're planning to do as we move into the future. So at the moment, we're currently in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough working with 13 groups who are registered with the hub. Each of those groups at a different stage of development. Some of them are at quite an early stage, and we're in the process of forming the group and constituting them. Other groups are in a more advanced stage and are using our support for information purposes and updates, particularly around national government policy on community-led housing and the development of the future community-led housing fund and what may come forward with that. The coverage for groups are detailed in the paper I've provided. We work in all districts with the exception of East Cambridgeshire. Two of the groups are currently in receipt of the small startup grant fund that the Combined Authority offers. These are Oakington Retirement Community and Rebel Acre Co-housing, and we're working with those two groups to get the funding spent, get the groups properly formatted and constituted so that they can then take their ideas forward. We're also have recently taken on a license for a support tool, which is provided by the community-led housing national network. It's the Wayshapers tool, and we're going to be running sessions with that for all groups as part of the support we offer. This is a business planning tool that takes groups through the process of what they need to do to move through the stages of community-led housing, from the group stage through to identifying a site, build, and then actually living and managing in the homes. As part of the wider network, we run a local authority network. One of the advantages of having a big geographic area is that we have a network of 50 local authorities across the east of England, 48 of which are planning authorities, and all the districts within Cambridgeshire and Cambridgeshire City Council are part of that network. We hold quarterly network meetings. The next one is due on the 13th of October. And we provide regular updates and reports of our work and activity to the network of local authorities who attend that. More direct work within Cambridgeshire and Peterborough is we do have individual meetings with each of the housing teams within the districts, and we are currently due to have meetings in the next few weeks with Peterborough and Fenland and Huntingdonshire, and we're also putting a date in fairly soon for Cambridge City and South Cambs. Finally, we have been updating some of our marketing and communication, both to groups and to the local authority network. In the next couple of weeks, we are relaunching our website, and running alongside that, we're also going to be doing some direct promotion to parishes and neighbourhood planning groups in the county, across the county. And obviously with our work as Cambridgeshire Acre, we have good links and access to parish councils and neighbourhood planning groups. That forms other parts of our work. And we will be going out directly, as I said, with an updated offer and generating more interest in looking at bringing new groups together. And that's a very quick overview. If anyone's got any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them, and I'll hand you back to Nick.
Thanks, Kieran. What I'll do is, if you don't mind, I'll ask you to hang around, and I'll present the paper, and then if members have any questions for either of us, we'll be able to answer them. So hang on, please.
Yep, that's fine.
Thanks. The proposal before members is for the Housing and Communities Committee to recommend to the Combined Authorities Board that funding of £100,000 is allocated to support established community homes groups across the whole of this Combined Authorities region. It's become apparent that these groups often require further support once they have become legally incorporated. The range of issues requiring funding will vary across each group and each project, but typical examples of expenditure incurred could include legal and planning matters, viability appraisals, site-specific issues, and preparation of partnership agreements. The proposal before members is to provide a source of follow-up funding to address these challenges and to maintain project momentum. funding criteria has been formulated that can be found at Appendix B to the paper. This criteria will ensure that funding is directed towards legally constituted community groups that have a clear long-term role in the project. It should be demonstrated that the project is deliverable and that expenditure will demonstrate value for money. I'd like to remind members that Eastern Community Homes provide support to groups across the combined authority region, excluding East Cambridgeshire, where East Cambridgeshire District Council provides independent support to groups within East Cambridgeshire. However, all groups across the combined authority region, including those within East Cambridgeshire, will be able to apply for this funding. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I've got a couple of hands. Councillor Bowden and then Councillor Ambrose Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. We all know the need for more affordable housing and why there needs to be support to achieve more supportable housing. I, for one, as you know, Chair, have concerns that throwing money at housing associations in the traditional form is not necessarily the best way of doing it. I think that housing associations in many cases show some degree of inflexibility and are, I'm sorry to say now, rather old-fashioned. And that's why I welcome alternative methods of providing affordable housing and why, in principle, I'm very much in favour of the community-led housing initiatives and the way in which that moves forward. It provides another avenue towards achieving affordable housing. I read Appendix B, and I have to say I left that not really understanding how value for money is calculated. Because as far as I am concerned, and sorry to look at this extremely simplistically, if you're talking about value for money, you've got to look at how much you're putting in, which we can measure, and what the outcome is. And the outcomes that we need to have, to the extent that we can calculate them, is the additionality that we achieve as a result of the money that we put in. And that really wasn't emphasized in Appendix B, and it leaves me rather in the dark about how effective this money will be. Now, as I say, I'm in principle in favour of it. I'm most certainly going to be voting in favour of this proposal. But what I would like to suggest is that we look at establishing some metrics here so that it will be possible in future to give some indication as to the extent to which additionality is achieved per pound spent. And the reason for doing that isn't to try and put a stop on the community-led housing initiative. It's because I hope that it will show it's a very effective way of achieving what we want to achieve, and that in fact we should be promoting this more in future. But we need the evidence to be able to support that. And what's difficult, as you know very well, Chair, is you spend money, especially of this nature, in year one, you're very unlikely to see the additional housing appearing in year one. That's unlikely, possible, but unlikely. So I fully appreciate it's not simple and straightforward, but I do think that having some more rigorous metrics involved and more rigorous measurement of the real outcomes in terms of additionality per pound spent really would be important for the future, for our decision making, and I hope that that would justify us pushing this forward more strongly. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Nick, and possibly wider input on the issue of how we plan to use this money. We did have a note circulated, which Nick might reference as well, which shows some of the projects. Thank you, Councillor Bowden. Nick Sweeney.
Thank you, Chair. The value for money in the criteria, that is to assess each bid. So if a community group would say, oh, we've got a problem with this site, say, there's a legal issue, we need £5,000 to address this legal issue, we will look at the information before us and ensure that it's being spent wisely and not just frittered away. I think that's the way we would assess each bid, and this criteria is to deal with the bid. I see what you're saying about measurement of the schemes overall, and I think that's a very good suggestion. I think the difficulty in it is that there are no robust sort of business plans formulated by the community groups. they're not professional people. They're just people from the community working together, and they have delivered some really good projects. I mean, there's one in Cambridge, Marmalade Lane, there's Swaffham Prior, there's Great Staunton, and it's great to see, but it's hard to actually get any concrete evidence from them that's measurable until the schemes get some momentum. Kieran, would you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'd really echo what you say, Nick. In certain respects, value for money is quite a subjective decision, and it's really around how the group presents itself in moving forward to the next stage of the development. What we can do, and we can support Nick with this. I know there are a number of hubs around the country, and we're part of the community-led housing network. And a number of these hubs operate similar grant funding schemes, and I know in certain areas they do apply particular matrix around evaluating competitive bids. And we can go away and have a conversation with those hubs and present that back to the committee.
Roger, could we also just get some idea of what a typical bid might be expected to be as well? Because this is a sum of money, and obviously no one's going to get 100k, but they're going to get an opportunity to bid. Roger.
All I was going to add, Chair, to the debate is that, and coming back to Councillor Bowden's point, I think, about how do we show the value for money, is that any schemes that are supported through this programme, we obviously need to track those schemes. The ultimate outcome is something being built. That is what really will prove the value for money, probably. So schemes are supported, as we'll be doing anyway. Those schemes will be tracked, and as you say, things in the housing and property world don't happen overnight. So you might give a grant for something in 3 months' time, and you might hope that maybe that starts to get built in 18 months' time, for example. So I think that is probably the ultimate test for the value for money, in terms of how many schemes actually come through and see construction taking place.
Anything to add, Nick?
In terms of a specific example of a typical issue, might be that, say, Community Homes Group have got an option to buy a site. They're looking at the site conditions, say. There's some, perhaps it was used as a mechanic's yard or something in a previous use. So they might say, right, as a requirement to the planning, we need a desktop contamination survey undertaken. And they might come to us and say, look, we'd like to, some extra funding because this wasn't foreseen. We might say, okay, £1,000, is a fair amount for that, say, for example. And then once the desktop contamination study is undertaken, this might reveal that further studies are required, which might include remediation, and a bid might come forward for £10,000. I think it says in the paper that each case is individual and vary. So really, we can't say at this stage because it's specific to each individual project.
Thank you, Chair. The point I was trying to make, I was trying to look backwards rather than forwards here, and looking at additionality. Now, it's almost a case here, I feel, that it's a matter of whether something will go ahead at all or not as a result of what we do. And just having that metric, I feel, would be helpful to us, if only to, not just to support this carrying on in the future, but potentially expanding. I won't be here, but I'm just a substitute, so it's not as though I'll be following this up in future, but I just feel it would be helpful to the committee in making decisions in future.
No, I mean, I think Nick will follow up and sort of just look at that, but sometimes we're moving a project on a stage, but there's clearly also a deliverability assessment about whether, not putting money into a project that hasn't got clear signs of the right things in place. Yeah. Councillor Ambrose-Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Nick, for the report. East East Cambs, who I represent, obviously do support this. I think it was their initiative which actually started it all off. We're really sort of pleased it's hopefully going forward. East Cambs put the proposition or request to Combined Authority in December 21, and in February 21, the Combined Authority supported this particular £100,000 request from East Cambs. The concern that East Cambs have, or I have on behalf of East Cambs, is that this £100,000 now has been diluted across the Combined Authority in total, and that's leave East Cambs feeling a little bit shortchanged. Is there any way that this can be increased, this £100,000, to give us a better representation than we really requested in the first place?
We would have to consider the funding that's already been allocated before we could consider that. And also we would have to consider exactly what East Cambridgeshire were going to spend the money on. I was aware that a bid had been submitted to my business programme colleagues. That didn't have any input from the housing team. And simply when we were made aware of it, we thought, well, actually, this is a good idea. Let's open it up to the rest of the region.
Fine, we agree. The point I'm making is the £100,000, which was agreed in principle by the Combined Authority Board in January 2022, of £100,000 for East Cambs, has been diluted by being spread. So you're not answering that point. Can we not expand that £100,000? Can we not increase that to whatever you might come up with?
Roger, can you come in, please? Thanks.
Yeah, sure. Obviously, there's a provision in the medium-term financial plan. This sum is provided. Any sum in excess of this is not provided. Any discussion about any additional monies would need to go back into the budget planning process. We know there are pressures throughout our budget. I think those that are on the board on this committee are aware of that. And it will be a decision, I guess, for leaders as to where their priorities are, as to where the money, limited money the Combined Authority does have, where it goes. Whether there's a majority that says actually they want to put more than this into this initiative at the moment. I mean, obviously this is for the next 2 years. That's a question I think back for the leaders, but at the moment this is the deal on the table. So, thank you.
Could I then ask that this we follow the process of this particular meeting? But could I ask then that this request is actually put to the board of increasing this £100,000 to a figure which is better suited for all?
Well, I'm happy, Councillor Ambrose-Smith, to just see what the bids come forward with and see how we spend it. We are going to be trimming how much is allocated to housing overall, but effectively what we're stating is a commitment to continue this. So I think we're just going to have to suck it and see. Well, I mean, your projects, some of them are going to be more advanced than some of the others, but there's a range of projects across the geography. So encourage, and I'd say that to everybody, other councils, encourage projects, encourage your housing leads to enable more projects to come forward. There can be a decent value for money evidence, and we'll have a look at what the evidence is on the first £100,000 that we spend. So I'm not ruling out that we don't look for some additional funding. We've currently, to resolve an issue which we won't need all of the funding, but we've currently got £500,000 spend and £500,000 staffing for housing, and that's under review because there's currently a restructure proposal. So I hope that assures you.
It does assure me, it does. But can I just ask a question? Thank you very much indeed. Not working, is it? Is it working?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. That does encourage me. Thank you very much indeed. I have another question. I may be a misreading on my behalf. Is the, in the paper, am I correct in saying that every application will come to this committee for approval?
Yeah, I was going to ask what the process is. I mean, I don't think that's necessary to be a decision by us, Nick, but obviously we would like to get an update when there's been several approvals. Nick?
It wasn't envisaged that each application would be determined by committee. If an application comes forward, it will be assessed by Eastern Community Homes in the first instance against the criteria at Appendix B, if that remains unchanged. And of course, we can prepare a report of expenditure or even applications received for committee if required.
Yeah, I mean, I would just expect us to get a report maybe in a year's time, but as and when we've got a sufficient number of bids come through. Okay. Councillor Batchelor.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. I didn't get any feel from the report on how many houses might actually be delivered by this process. Clearly, this is a sort of niche area, and we're not talking about large numbers or anything. My own authority has been trying to encourage community builds for quite a long while, and I might say over that quite a long while, only one community-led project has been successful. And the reason that was successful was that it owned its own land. In our area, certainly, and I'm sure probably in others, the big issue will still be the same, and that's availability of land at a price that can be afforded. I'm not sure, certainly it will make no little difference in South Cambs, this project, because I can't see that unless they've got some philanthropy, somebody prepared to give the land at a discounted price, or the charity itself owns some land, that's the only option for this sort of project. So I just, equally, the criteria for money ongoing, as Councillor Bowden was making the point, seems a little bit loose. I mean, there's no definition, for example, what sort of grant would be available. There's no maximum, there's no cap on it. Well, in fact, there's no budget at the moment, is there? So I'm not sure where this is going. I mean, it's the community activity is to be encouraged. The amount of money we're talking about is not large. And it may well be more effective in other areas than mine, but I can't see there's much prospect of future development. Thank you.
A downbeat view. I mean, I was involved over several years with the project at Marmalade Lane, and whilst it was challenging, it does evidence, along with the community land trusts in East Cambridgeshire and elsewhere, that quite a lot can be achieved. But some of them are inevitably going to be partnerships, because you've got to unlock land, mix of housing. You're going to have quite a complicated project to oversee. But if you look at some of the learning from a project like Marmalade Lane or some of the other community projects around the country, they do have lessons for us. So, any other questions, comments? Thank you for your input. We've got some points to follow up both on metric and also reporting back. But the two-pager that was shared is a very useful summary, and there are projects around the geography, so do encourage more. So can I do this better than I did on the earlier item and seek a proposer and a seconder? A proposer, Councillor Ambrose Smith, and a seconder, Councillor Bowden. Can I see all those in favour? Thank you, and thank you for the input on that and for the work, Kieran, and the link to ACRE, who are already involved in a wide range of projects in this zone, and by Nick. So if I can move on to item 3.1, that's Affordable Housing Programme Update, and ask Roger Thompson to introduce this report.
Thank you, Chair. This is a relatively brief report updating the committee on the progress on the delivery of the Affordable Housing Programme scheme. At this moment, at the time of writing this report, there were 481 units that had now completed. The balance of the 1,451 are on site and progressing. The grant rate, just to confirm across the whole programme, is averaging at 38,700. Since we last reported the scheme at Bretton Court in Peterborough, which comprised 45 units, we've been notified that although that scheme started with some stripping out and some demolition, it's not now going to be proceeding. So we are looking at a substitution process for those number of units and that amount of grant. One of those substitution schemes is being presented later today in item 3.3. We continue to look for other schemes to substitute the balance of the small number of units, which is 39. And we hope to bring some papers to committee at a future point with some proposals on that. Since the committee last met, we've also been aware more formally of the acquisition of the scheme at Northminster in Peterborough from the PIP to Crosskeys Homes. I don't think there's any reason for undue alarm about that. Crosskeys are intending and have been proceeding with delivering the scheme. We are going to bring a more comprehensive report on that to committee next month, so committee can fully understand the transaction and any implications that there might be for the scheme and the grant agreement. So that's a sort of forewarning for you. In terms of financial implications, there's nothing new. We continue to sort of monitor the schemes in ASMA when various stages of schemes are hit in terms of their development. We get those grant applications in and make those payments. So that's a brief summary for committee. The appendices have been hopefully simplified. I think there was a request last time to make them slightly easier to read and understand. And I'll hand that back to you, Chair. Thank you.
Any questions? Councillor Bowden?
Thank you, Chair. And yes, thank you for the simplified information. It was actually really useful because it was possible to do lots of calculations on that, and that was interesting. In Appendix 1, the first item on the second page struck me as interesting for two reasons. This is Halo Roman Fields Phase 2 Paston, where we're meant to be getting 30 properties and just over £1 million to be spent on it. The first is that the start on site is shown as the 1st of January 2018, yet no properties are shown as being completed yet, which were more than 4 years since the start on site, and a date is in there, which I think is the latest date there is in all of the schedules, which is 31st of October 23 as the expected completion date. Is there an issue with that? And whilst that came up when I did my analysis, I then noticed that alone, as far as I can tell in this schedule, but the amount which is involved, just over £1,006,000, is the only one which is in red. So I thought maybe there is some issue with this particular item, and if it's not a problem with commercial confidentiality, I wonder if we can be assured that everything is going according to plan as far as that's concerned.
When I was first a councillor, I looked for the snowpeak changes in the reports. Asma, can you come and add to that Halo Paston scheme?
Yes. Can everybody hear me? Right, Councillor Bowden, it is on site. We believe it's near completion. We haven't had PC certificates yet, and I'm waiting on PC certificates to actually verify that they are completed. I believe they are nearly there. The date I was given was the date that Halo had given me, which is the date that Keepmoat gave them. So unfortunately, it's second-hand information, but it is, as it is at the moment, 31st of October 2023. It is in red, the figure, only because there is a couple of clawbacks involved from other sites that Halo have acquired and have paid out to. So that is going to slightly change some of the figures up above, when that will go black eventually. So that's why it's red at the moment.
So is it going to be higher or lower?
No, it's going to be exactly the same.
Okay. Okay, are you all right on that?
I've raised the issue, and I'm sure that if it still looks the same next time you have a committee meeting, I'm sure that you will
Yep, thank you for your direct and inquisitorial approach. Any other questions on this update? We're coming on to one of the reports that's consequent on the Bretton Court issue later. Can I have a proposer and seconder to?
Sorry, it's just a question. I mean, obviously this is disappointing that the Bretton Court scheme is not coming forward. It looks to me as if that's because they haven't made progress and therefore the planning permission has not gone through. Are there other significant reasons why it hasn't? I mean, one of my reasons for asking is that over several years there were concerns raised about particularly the Peterborough parts of the housing programme by a Peterborough councillor. And I'm just wondering whether some of those have been proved to be correct or whether this is not something that could ever have been predicted.
Hello there. Yeah, no, we were aware that there were problems. We were told by Medisham Homes at the time that their permitted development planning application had expired. They were only given a period of time to actually start on site and complete, and they'd started by stripping it all out, but never got any further. There also have been issues on the site with the pub next door. There's lots of outcry for it to remain as part of the project. And I think that stalled some of the problems of them actually proceeding with the development.
Okay, thank you. I'm not sure how much that answers my question, but I'll try and take it up outside. Thank you.
So I'll move to seek a proposer and a seconder for the report. To note. Okay, sorry, I'm being over elaborate. So we've got a recommendation to, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong page, to note the report. So all those in favour? Thank you. That was again unanimous. And if we can then move on to item 3.2, it's an update also from Roger Thompson, and this is the housing loans report.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the regular update in connection with the situation and position concerning the 5 housing loans that the CPCA has granted and upon which we're relying on the repayment of those loans to fund the affordable housing programme in terms of the grant schemes. I'm not going to go through the report in particular detail because I think the key item is probably the first appendices at the back of the report, which identifies the position last reported to Commission on the 27th of June in terms of the 3 outstanding loans, which are the ECTC scheme at MOD Ely, ECTC at Haddenham and Lara Homes at Histon Road in Cambridge. The positive news is that between the end of June and the middle of August, we saw quite a lot of repayment coming in, rather pleasingly, both on the MOD Ely scheme, which had a quite significant repayment, which brought the balance down to just over £10 million, and the ECTC scheme at Haddenham, which brought their balance down to just over £3 million. I can give committee a verbal update on where things sit at the moment because it's been some time since this paper was prepared for committee, and the sort of positive trend has continued so far in that the balance on MOD Ely is now down below 10 million. And on Haddenham, we're down at around 1.8 million in terms of the balances outstanding as we sit at the moment. So house sales have proceeded well and things have looked good. I guess there is probably going to come as a question, so I'll deal with it now. One word of caution about the housing environment that we see at the moment, the economic situation and the mortgage market. We're going to watch very closely what's happening. I have checked and I'm not aware of any sales yet having fallen through because of this situation with increased cost of mortgages and the rebalancing, if you like, of the mortgage market to reflect the current financial market. To be frank, I'm expecting to see some. So we'll just have to monitor how that goes over the next few months. But there's a large number of units under offer. And having spoken with ECTC, I believe they're still quite confident about sales continuing and them managing the repayments. For example, the scheme at Hadnam now, I think, is fully under offer. So all the schemes at Hadnam are under offer to purchasers. So Hadnam in particular may well, hopefully, close their loan and repay the interest quite soon. So that's the update from me. Thank you, Chair.
Any questions? No. So the recommendations to note the report, all those in favour? Thank you. Right, we move on to the last item, which is 3.3, 24 High Street, Wisbech. Asma, you're going to introduce this one?
Thank you, Chair. Right, as I just wanted to make note, the funding for this project is coming from the Bretton Court project, which has failed to proceed. So 24 High Street, Wisbech came to us. It's a site that's a development on the High Street in Wisbech. It's got 6 one-bedroom flats at an affordable rent level, which will be managed by FDC. Fenland District Council own the land and have given it full planning permission. The site falls in a conservation area and has an importance on the High Street and the wider community in general. It's been vacant for several years, has a difficult position for its poor site access. It hasn't been very commercially viable for development until now. To increase the development prospects and revitalise the site and increase footfall, they've decided to regenerate the site. The site comprises of a retail unit on the ground floor and a studio apartment, and then 3 upper floors with 6 rooms, 1 bedrooms, flats. The site is currently having planning conditions discharged and tenders are being looked for contractors. The rents will be set at no more than 80% of market rent, which is lower than LHA rates for a 1-bed. The monies, as I've mentioned, comes from Bretton Court. The grant is 210,000. I've spoken to the housing enabling officer who says the 1-bed is a greatest need of this accommodation in the Fenland area. And the site has the use of solar panels, cycle racks, and energy efficient mechanisms to help combat climate change.
Thank you. Anyone want to ask a question or make a contribution? Councillor Bowden.
If I may make a point, and thank you, Chair. I think that sometimes our representatives from Cambridge City and South Cambs might wonder what we're up to up in Fenland when something like this comes forward. But our problems are almost exactly the reverse of many of the problems that you've got so far as development and housing are concerned. This is an extremely prominent site, extremely important building in a sense, and the deficit on development of this, or redevelopment of it, because it is nothing more than a husk, the deficit on development is astronomical. It's astonishing. And I'm sorry to say it's not the only gap that we have in High Street, Wisbech. And it is only thanks to large amounts of public money from various sources, PCA, thank you very much indeed, Fenland District Council as well. It's only by putting large amounts of public money in that we can manage to get a scheme off the ground and actually manage to produce anything from what in other parts of the county would be seen as a prime prestige key site which developers would be scrambling over themselves to develop. And the numbers are just totally different the further north you get in the county. So I just wanted to emphasise that point. I'm very grateful indeed that this is being considered by the CPCA, and it's much, much needed in order to just be able to get this deficit down to an almost reasonable figure. It's not reasonable in my opinion, and FDC are putting an awful lot of money into this, but it just has to be done. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. And I did have a look at the nature of the homes provided, and yeah, they're good flats. So they, within, as you say, a very different housing market, totally different viability. It's about gathering different sources, but this does effectively provide 6 flats at the max 80% of affordable market rent. So, Councillor Nessing.
I would like to support this project very thoroughly. I think it is a really good project. And I think that many of us who live in the south are very well aware of the issues in the north. One of the things I would like to say, though, on that, I've said I'm completely supportive of this project. I think it's really important. I think it's important not to view the whole of Fenland as the same either, because actually if this was on the high street in March, it would be different. Maybe it wouldn't be like if it was on the high street in Cambridge, obviously, it would, but it would nevertheless be different. But actually, Wisbech High Street, it's a beautiful place, but it does need our support, and therefore I'm absolutely delighted that this has come forward. I'm not delighted about why, because I think the problems in Peterborough are quite serious for us, but I'm very pleased that we're able to support this one.
Thank you. Councillor Bowden.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very grateful for Councillor Netzinger's understanding of the situation, and it is counterintuitive, to be quite honest, when compared with those who just look at what's happening in the south of the county. And Councillor Netzinger, you're entirely correct. If it were on the High Street or Broad Street in March, it would be different from the same situation in Wisbech, but it would be different to the extent that the deficit would be less. It still wouldn't be economically viable, but it would be manageable. This one isn't manageable under any normal economic consideration. I'm sorry to say that you are correct. It's not unique in Wisbech itself, but the situation in Wisbech is worse than it is in the rest of Fenland. And generally, the further south in Fenland you get, the less deficit exists.
Thank you. Just whilst we're still on this item, we'll clearly have officers looking to see how to best use the remainder of the Breton money. And the pattern that we were under kind of a very strict reporting regime up till March is that we have so far had fair degree of support, or at least acceptance, from Deluxe when we've suggested some of these changes. So I think that's partly that they've got the spirit that it's up to us to manage this money effectively from now on. So there may be a couple of further reports, and I wouldn't rule out one of them being from Wisbech High Street. Thank you for that. Do I have a proposer and a seconder, please? So I've got Councillor, I'll take Councillor Bowden proposing and Councillor Netzinger for seconding. All those in favour? Unanimous, thank you. We've got an update at the back now, on the back page, and I think Roger mentioned that there's an expectation of a report about Northminster. I mean, part of the reason why I think we should report that, and the sale by Peterborough County Council's partnership to Cross Keys Homes, of which, just for the record, I have no longer any interest linked to Cross Keys, is that that's quite a sizable sum of money. So we should ask some questions just to check that we're getting a transfer of value. So in addition to that, we've got our update reports, and particularly a report on digital connectivity. So we are looking to achieve a good input from you all at the next meeting on the 14th of November. So thank you for coming and for your inputs. And I declare the meeting closed.